Some kinds of loneliness don't make a sound. You can live in a quiet house and answer the phone with a steady voice and tell everyone I am fine. This is the story of an 82-year-old woman, a loyal dog who never left her side, and a small paw that brought her family back together.
At 82, Evelyn Harper had mastered the art of sounding fine. Her voice on the phone was steady. Her laugh arrived on cue. Her sentences were tidy. "I'm fine, dear." It was the most practiced sentence of her life. Her house stood at the end of Maple Street, white siding slightly weathered, blue hydrangeas lining the path like faithful sentries. Inside, the clocks ticked loudly. The refrigerator hummed. The old oak floors remembered footsteps that no longer echoed through them. And always, and there was Benny. Golden brown fur with a white patch at his chest. A crooked tail that wagged like an uneven metronome. Eyes the color of warm honey. He followed her from room to room as if she were fragile porcelain. Not because she was weak, because he understood devotion. Daniel called every Sunday. Marissa texted daily. That was the rhythm. Daniel's wife, Claire, kept life efficient. Her planner was color-coded. Her tone was polished. She believed in practicality. "She's independent," Claire often told Daniel. "Your mom's doing great on her own." Independent. It sounded admirable. It also meant unnecessary. When Daniel visited, Claire often waited in the car. "It's easier," she'd say. "Quick drop-in." The visit shortened over the years in 20 minutes, then 15. Groceries placed neatly on the counter. "Call if you need anything, Mom." Evelyn would smile. "I don't need much." And it was true. She didn't need much, just someone to sit longer than the kettle took to cool. When Robert, her husband of 53 years, died, the house changed temperature. Grief has a climate. It makes air thinner. But Benny filled that climate with warmth. He slept pressed against her slippers. He listened when she read aloud from old recipe cards. He watched thunderstorms from the porch without fear because she was beside him. At night, when loneliness grew large and shapeless, Benny would rest his chin on her knee. He never offered advice. He offered presence. There is a difference. The autumn Benny stopped eating. The maple tree in the yard had just begun to flame red. Evelyn noticed immediately. "You're just tired," she whispered, kneeling beside him. She called Daniel. "He's slowing down," she said softly. Daniel hesitated. "Mom, he's 12. That's old for a dog." Claire's voice drifted faintly in the background. It might be time to prepare her. Prepare her as if love were something you scheduled in advance. The vet visit. The clinic smelled sterile and faintly sweet. Leaves scratched against the window. The vet spoke gently. "His heart is failing." Such a clean sentence for such a devastating truth. Evelyn nodded. "May I hold him?" She gathered Benny into her arms. His body felt lighter than it had any right to be. His breathing was uneven now. She pressed her cheek to his fur. "It's all right," she whispered. "You stayed with me. That's all I ever needed." And then, with effort, with intention, Benny lifted his paw, slowly, placed it on her hand. Not a reflex, not random, deliberate, comforting, as if he were easing her departure from something. She felt the warmth of his paw, and then stillness. Outside, wind scattered leaves across the pavement. Returning home without him was like entering a museum of a life that had just ended. The water bowl, the leash, the worn indent in his bed. That evening, she lowered herself into her armchair. Her hand reached down automatically, met nothing. She kept it suspended in midair for several seconds, hoping muscle memory could resurrect warmth. Then slowly, she folded it into her lap. That was the first night she did not sleep. Daniel visited the following Sunday. Claire came inside this time. She stood in the living room, scanning it quietly. "It might be safer without a dog," she said gently. "Less responsibility." Evelyn nodded politely. Claire meant well, but there was a subtle impatience in her efficiency. A quiet thought that aging should be streamlined. When Claire noticed the collar placed carefully beside the chair, she frowned. Maybe it would help if we put that away. Evelyn's hand instinctively covered it. I'm not ready. Claire smiled, tight, controlled. Of course, but grief to Claire seemed impractical. One afternoon, Daniel picked up the collar, absent-mindedly. Why keep it here, Mom? Evelyn looked at him for a long time. Because, she said quietly, the space was never empty. Daniel shifted. When your father died, she continued, I didn't want to trouble you children with my loneliness. You had careers, families. Her voice did not accuse, it trembled slightly. So he carried it for me. Silence fell, heavy. And now, she added, the chair feels larger. Something inside Daniel cracked open. He saw it suddenly, not just the dog's absence, but the years she had absorbed her grief alone so they wouldn't feel burdened. Claire looked down. For the first time, efficiency had no answer. That evening, Daniel drove home in silence. Claire spoke softly. She didn't tell us. No, Daniel replied. She protected us. The following Saturday, Daniel returned. Alone. He did not bring groceries. He brought time. They drank tea. He listened to stories about Robert, about the early years, about the children when they were small. Marissa flew in 2 weeks later. They opened photo albums, pictures of Benny asleep between them on Christmas mornings. Marissa covered her mouth. I forgot. Yes, Evelyn said gently. We all do. One crisp November afternoon, Daniel arrived, carrying a small bundle, wrapped in a blanket. Claire walked beside him this time. Inside the blanket trembled a sandy-colored rescue puppy with oversized ears. We're not replacing him, Daniel said quickly. We just thought, maybe there's room. Claire stepped forward. He needs someone steady, she added softly. The puppy hesitated in the doorway. Then, as if drawn by invisible thread, it padded across the living room, straight to the armchair, and sat. In the exact place Benny once rested. Evelyn froze, her breath caught. The puppy lifted its tiny paw, placed it gently against her hand. The room went silent, not because it was the same, but because it was love returning in a different shape. That evening, the house sounded different. Teacups clinked softly in the kitchen. Laughter drifted through the hallway. Footsteps lingered longer than necessary. But before the evening settled into warmth, something quiet happened that none of them expected. The puppy, still uncertain about this new place, wandered slowly around the living room. Its small paws clicked softly against the old oak floorboards, the same boards that had carried decades of Evelyn's life. It sniffed the edge of the rug, the coffee table, the worn arm of Robert's old chair. Then it wandered toward the corner where Benny's bed still rested. Evelyn had not moved it. She hadn't been able to. The puppy paused there, tilting its head as if studying something invisible. The room grew quiet as Daniel and Marissa watched. Then, with surprising confidence for such a small creature, it circled once and curled into the bed, exactly where Benny used to sleep. Evelyn felt something shift inside her chest, not the sharp ache she had carried since that afternoon in the clinic. Something softer, something warmer, a continuation. Daniel noticed the tears gathering in her eyes. Mom, he began gently, but Evelyn shook her head. No, she whispered with a small smile. These aren't sad tears. She reached down and rested her hand on the puppy's back. The tiny body rose and fell with slow, peaceful breaths. It's strange, she said quietly. When your father died, the house felt like the world had stopped. Her finger moved slowly through the puppy's fur. And when Benny left, it felt like the quiet got even bigger. She looked around the room now, at Daniel leaning against the doorway, at Marissa curled on the couch, at Claire, carefully writing down ingredients for the pie. But tonight, Evelyn said softly, it feels like life remembered where this house is. Claire glanced up from the notebook and met Evelyn's eyes. For the first time since she had entered the house years earlier, there was no careful politeness in her expression, only warmth. You know, Claire said gently, I think this little one might need a name. Marissa leaned forward immediately. Oh, we have to name him something good. Daniel laughed softly. Let's not rush it. Evelyn looked down at the puppy again. The tiny tail thumped once against the bed. Slow, content. Well, she said thoughtfully, we'll have time to decide. She glanced around the room once more. And this time, the silence in the house no longer felt empty. It felt full of voices, full of warmth, full of the kind of presence that stays longer than 15 minutes. Evelyn settled back into her chair, her hand resting once again on the warm fur. Daniel was still in the kitchen. Marissa was still on the couch. Claire was still asking questions about the recipe. And the house, which had carried so much quiet for so long, finally sounded like a home again. Because sometimes it takes losing the one who never left to remind us not to leave the ones who remain. And sometimes the smallest paw is what presses a family gently back together.
If this story touched your heart, there are many more like it waiting here. Subscribe and walk with us through stories of love, memory, and the small moments that bring families back together.